All right, guys, hit like and subscribe if you like this stuff. So here is our final trip to the dyno. We had something last time. We did our final tune, and then we had an anomaly, and I was 99% sure what it was. So when I had my tune that I created by my butt dyno for the 2022 Speed Twin, with an X pipe and open mufflers and stuff, stock air filter. This is what we came up with, which looked pretty good. Pretty good torque curve, a little bit of blips here and there and stuff, but horsepower, good. By the way, this is uncorrected. There's no SAE or standard correction factor adding to this. This is actually raw numbers. This is what the bike made. This is also up in the North Georgia mountains. So we are up somewhere 3,000 feet elevation. So those are great numbers, uncorrected. So for that bike, I mean, Triumph claims 100 horsepower at the crank. We're getting over that at the wheel at elevation, so not at sea level. So that's when you're doing correction factor. It looks at temperature, humidity, air pressure, all that kind of stuff. How high are you above sea level? And your bike might make 92 at, Denver. And then they say, okay, well, the correction factor at sea level for 60 degrees, you should be making about 100, whatever. This is straight horsepower. This is what it made. All right. So this is what I was getting with just my tune. Then I took it to Charles. We did a tune on the dyno, and we noticed an issue. So, different, again, because this is uncorrected, different dyno, or same dyno, different day, if it's warmer, colder, lower humidity, you're going to see, a couple horsepower swing from day to day. In fact, if you go in the wintertime and then you go in the summertime, you might see in it 6, 8, 10 horsepower difference. That's why you normally use uncorrected, or you use a correction factor. I'm using uncorrected here. Just because I want apples to apples. So what do we have here? Well, we noticed it was making, for all intents and purposes, one was making a little bit more here, then the other was making a little bit more over here, whatever. They're basically tied. And then until here. Now, when I looked at my map, I didn't have my Bluetooth adapter at the dyno. So I didn't have that ability to go and say, I went in, I looked at the map, and I saw what was pretty clear to me. We'd made a typo on the cells at 100% throttle at 8,000, where I guess I meant to add 5% fuel, and I must have hit like 35% accidentally, because it just went whoa. So for these runs, we didn't have the air fuel ratio running. So I looked at my map to say, well, what could be different about the one map versus the other? They were basically tied out here, although the motor was a little bit smoother, but we lost 8 horsepower out here. Peak power was roughly about the same. You're looking at 102.9 to 101 point. All right, just taking account different days and atmospheric conditions. That's we're basically tied. But out here, up to 7,500. Now I don't know how many of you ride past that RPM anyway. I run it almost to rev line when I'm riding hard. I'm using all the revs because it's short gearing, and so out here you're talking about an 8 horsepower difference. The horsepower just blah. Well, here's why. It was because of that. We added way too much fuel. I since backed that off when I got home, reflashed the ECU, and that map is what all of you that's downloaded recently, that shared folder I've given to some folks for custom tunes, that reflects the changes I made. So what were those changes? Well, let's get rid of the old tune, and let's add in the final tune. So here's where we're at now. I've got 103.65, not much of a gain, but again, this is uncorrected. This is what we made today. I got back that 8, 9 horsepower that was missing out here. I leaned it out by about 25%, which means it was added 10 from what my original Dave map was, and we got that power back. And we actually picked up, again, different day, but we basically picked up a horsepower over where it was before. So that gap, if you were up here and you even notice, I don't know how many of you ride to 8,000 RPMs, okay? Probably not a lot. A couple of you do. But if you're riding this thing like a sport bike, this thing now pulls and this is where it hits the rev limiter, right there at just under 8,200. So it doesn't drop off. The stock bike tended to drop off because your throttle plates were closing after 7,000 RPMs and it was starting to shut down power production. By holding those plates open, we've got really good, almost 104 horsepower, and we're pulling 85 foot-pounds of torque today. That is a lot. That is a great result. So I'm going to post these results. This is what we had. This was the old where I made the typo. I've corrected that, and now we're up there. So let's get rid of that. Give me 1 second. Let's get rid of that. And let's go to double graph. Our air-fuel ratio, there's still a little bit rich there. I mean, technically out here, we might have another horsepower or two. And I could probably lean that out or richen that up just a little bit. And then down here, it was just a little bit lean, not crazy. We're probably talking like maybe 1 or 2 horsepower. I mean, max, if that. Maybe 1 horsepower out here. And maybe half, 3/4 up to a horsepower there. We're not talking about much. So I could refine my map just a tiny bit. But honestly, I'm just going to leave it. I mean, when you look at where the power is, you look at how, smooth that is. There doesn't appear to be a dip. I mean, right here where it says it's going a little lean, it actually bumped up in torque. So you know what? I'm just going to ignore this. In fact, let's just pretend that didn't happen. Let's just look at what it's doing. We're 103 plus pretty much to redline. The rev limiter cuts in right there, and we're at 102.77. So we're basically pulling 103 horsepower, and then we've got, pretty good torque curve. So I'm happy with this. Here it starts to level off and starts to plateau. This is where I think if you had a cam or something in it, there's a reason why this thing's pulling 80 foot-pounds of torque all the way down low and holding it for most of the rev range. This is a sign of the cam. The meat of the power in the torque is here, and then you see that torque start to nosedive. It does rev out a bit, so it will keep making power. But basically, we're making 100 horsepower at 6,500. You can say, well, why rev it out all the way to here? Just shift and what? Well, because you can keep pulling here. It does increase slightly, but you've got these usable revs if you want to be on the track and you want to be, keep pulling. Otherwise, you're just going to keep short shifting. But here, you can keep accelerating all the way right to 8,000. A lot of bikes, it might peak here and then start to nosedive. And so, yeah, you could rev it out here, but you're better off shifting here and going back to here, shift. If you go up here, it's like, and then you shift. You're losing acceleration here. I mean, you still may accelerate, but you're going to accelerate at a lower rate. Here, my map, run at the frickin' red line, man. You're going to be, even though it's not a big gain from here to there, you're not losing power. So it's going to keep pulling hard this whole way. So that's where we're at. That was our final numbers on this particular day, 103.65 and a whopping 85 foot-pounds of torque. Not bad. So I hope you enjoy that. I've also got a video coming that's going to be talking to Kent, the owner over at GMD Computrak, about linear versus progressive springs and why almost always you want linear springs. Anyway, we'll talk to you soon.